Hi, Isabel.
Hi, Christine.
How are you?
I'm in the canteen at the Financial Times.
Excellent. I'm at home. So we were just talking off the record about the job apocalypse of graduates, which was really, really interesting. Now, I've been hearing from recruiters that things are really rough out there, and that because of all the uncertainty, things are in kind of paralysis. What are you hearing?
Yes, that plus the kind of extra layer that I'm now hearing about, and there's no research for this. This is kind of breaking news, is that people are starting to recruit people they know or the children of people they know. The extended network is coming into play because if you've got 140 applications for every graduate job, which is the average now, I think, and probably hundreds more than that for law, accountancy, that kind of thing, you're going to have to find a way to sift it down, and the AI might not be the best way to do that. And we're people, we are connected to other people. That's our natural instinct. And I do wonder if there's a piece here around the AI removing something essentially human from us, and we haven't quite got to grips with that. I don't know what you think.
There was some emerging research I looked at last year from Amsterdam, from a university over there, and it was about how people lose connection with AI. They have fewer conversations. And I think one of the things we see repeatedly is this need for connection, this need for mattering. And I think those personal connections, they become really important when people feel a bit isolated, a bit scared, a bit overwhelmed. Actually, someone that you sort of know, somebody that you sort of instinctively trust, who's part of your tribe. I mean, it's all the stuff that we've steered away for the last 15 years, saying we don't want that in offices. It's a bit fascinating. We seem to be letting it slide back, isn't it?
I think it's going into really radically different directions. I was talking to a colleague about this morning. I mean, the recruitment is a piece of this. So, some big corporates are becoming, they're anti any sort of DEI or activism or, recruitment that favors certain groups, and others are still massively in that, fairness, inclusion, belonging are absolutely the watchwords. To me, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, there's less and less in the middle. Business corporate life seems to be bifurcating, and we're talking outside the US here. We're talking the UK and probably Europe.
Yeah, I definitely think that US influence is coming hard and fast. And anybody who was a bit compromised, I mean, I interviewed somebody last year, I talked about it, who was fascinating, who said, when I worked at Goldman, I knew that they didn't really care about all of that stuff, but they did, and it was quite clear that they didn't. It was like, do your job, work really hard, work long hours, it's very clear. When I went to a British high street bank in a similar role, they spoke those values, but in reality, when the pressure hit, it didn't really matter. And I found that much more confusing because it was two different message sets. So actually, I think this world has allowed people to really retract into the message set. Now, on this subject, I met someone this week who said something that absolutely fascinated me, and I wanted to test it out on you. He said, and he's very senior, very experienced business person, good, not particularly sort of extremist in his views about anything. But he said, why are we firing these people for having affairs at work? They're very good at their jobs. Should we be doing this? Have we lost our mind? I thought, what an interesting question. What do you think?
I think it depends. And I think with the CEO, it might be a special case because the ethics of being a CEO, the transparency, the due diligence, the way that you're a person that other people look up to, I think that's really important. I think the average affair inside a company, that's a different thing. Now, interestingly, the Nestle CEO, there were whistleblowers on an internal line, weren't there?
Yeah,
It was the anonymous
yeah,
complaints line.
yeah.
That's what got him. But I do think CEOs are a special case. What do you think, Christine?
Well, I think it's an interesting one. I guess I hadn't really challenged it. It just seems to be what we do. I think there's a couple of things. Have they broken policy? And I think some cases there's favoritism, there's expenses questions. Who were you with? Why were you in that country or doing whatever you were doing? So I think those things sit in a category of their own. I think where there's disclosure, if there's a rule that there has to be disclosure and you haven't disclosed it because it's an affair, then I can understand why you might not have disclosed it, but I can see how that is a breach of policy. You've got to hold people to policy. But are we holding CEOs to a different standard? I just had a bit of a Google as I was thinking about this of sort of people who have had sexual indiscretions but done quite interesting things. I mean, Nelson Mandela had quite a lot of affairs. Gandhi had some very dubious practices of sleeping alongside young women to test his celibacy, which I think would question quite strongly. Kennedy, Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Jefferson, the American president. I mean, quite a lot. So are we losing talent? Who's to say?
I suppose it is the transparency thing. If you've got a CEO who's in a polycule, for example, and they're upfront about it, I don't think you could sack them after the fact in the
Would you
very
would you
modern
be
way.
upfront about it if you were the CEO though?
You're going to send me down a Google rabbit hole now to have a look. They'll be in Brooklyn. They'll be in Brooklyn, of
They
course.
will be in Brooklyn, and some of our audience will now be Googling polycule, which I will allow them to do because I'm not defining it. Okay, right. So let's keep an eye on it because the Nestle share price has suffered since he went, hasn't it?
Yeah, although they've appointed someone internal, I think the former head of the Nespresso brand. So a very safe pair of hands, if I may say that.
Okay, well, let's see what happens. So 906, a bit of background. I was just sort of checking its origins. I sort of one of those expressions been around for a while. So sort of 2010 came up through China, and it was literally the working practices. So 9 till 9, 6 days a week. That's what it comes from. A lot of rumours, lovely piece in Wired saying that it's being quite heavily adopted by the tech community in the States, AI startup California. What do you think about it? 996.
I think Saturday is a work day for a lot of people. I mean, weirdly, I think for a lot of us, and I don't know how for me, Saturday is the day I never work. But I usually start logging on again probably after lunch, tea time-ish on Sunday, just to avoid that Sunday scaries thing. So I don't know, 995.5.
Yeah, well, 996 is a 72-hour week. I mean, it's pretty. And so, there's a really good Wired piece on it if anybody's interested in this. But they said in that recruiters were being briefed to check people's work ethic. I mean, I think it's coming out of the sort of Musk, hardcore work ethic, and maybe the Zuckerman more masculinity, sort of this idea that being really tough. I saw a very interesting quote from a guy described as a venture capitalist. I think it's British, Harry Stebbings, never heard of him, maybe you know him, who said that 996 was old news and it's all now 007, which apparently means having a team that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it is a team of different people.
Okay, so you've got coverage all the
All
time
the time. And
globally.
what he's saying is the Chinese have moved to that model. So 996 is actually just not even half the time, is it? And it's a bit lame.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone watching this who lives in, APAC region probably works extraordinarily long hours just to keep up with colleagues on other sides of the globe. So they may have something to say about that existing already.
Yeah, comments, yeah, experiences welcome and experiences from the tech world as well. What else is on your list this week, Isabel?
This week, I've been thinking a lot about curiosity. I find myself talking about this a lot. And then I think, actually, am I living what I'm spouting, essentially? So I've been right down a ChatGPT rabbit hole, learning about the difference between generative AI, AGI, and quantum computing. It's very hard, let me tell you. Generative AI is just the beginning of it. AGI, is coming, and quantum may be coming. But what has been interesting me is there's a lot of Substack action buzz, which is where I look for my next big things around investment in quantum. NVIDIA's just made a massive investment in some quantum computing companies. So that's where I'm placing my energies this week.
Okay, so I've just read this book, the AI Savvy Leader, by David De Cremer. Do you know what? I've read quite a lot about AI. I too am going down various rabbit holes, and most of what I've read has not been that interesting. I thought this was good. There were a couple of really sensible points in it. One of them was that nobody feels they know enough, which is what you've just said. It's impossible to feel that you know enough about AI. And so a lot of leaders are therefore paralyzed because you can't ever know all of it. So how do you make decisions? Which might take us back to kind of where we started with the graduates in a way.
But I think the information overwhelm is something we've been trying to get to grips with as people for a long time. Can we apply some of the techniques we've learned to clean up our tech habits to our work habits now?
We've got a lot of evidence about how you build a strategy when you don't have all the information. It feels to me we kind of have to go back to basics. There's a few things he says in here which really he lands really well. I mean, they're not things you've never heard before, but I think he lands them really clearly. So things like chief execs going in saying, right, we're introducing this AI enterprise level program or app or whatever it is. We expect that half of you won't be here in 2 years' time. Understandably, doesn't go very well because people don't use it or they look for faults in it. So actually the way that we introduce stuff is really, really important. We need to think much more carefully about that, which I thought was great. And he talks a lot about how we forget the human values. He's got a nice case study on a American health insurance, I think it was, firm that introduced an app, AI sort of app, which would define whether people should continue with cancer treatment or not based on their outcomes. But of course, what it never took into was the state of mind of the patient, which is, has somebody just like they're done and they're just, I don't want any more, or actually somebody's really up for it, because obviously that also impacts on the outcomes. So
That's really interesting. So, I mean, we hear a lot about the human side of AI and how important it is, but the specifics are often sketchy.
And a lot about how customers respond to AI as well, and how sometimes well, a lot of leaders sort of gone into this sort of the technology leading it. And so the analogy that came to mind, I don't know, I don't think he said this. I think it was the one that the sort of visual that came to my mind is: have you got a combine harvester and are thinking, right, we need to, plant a field of wheat, or have you got a field of wheat and think, what technology do we need to bring this in and turn it into something else? And it seems that in some ways the tech potential is leading the way. But I'm sure you saw the MIT report saying that 95% of enterprise AI so far hasn't delivered any value yet. I mean, it will, to your point about the investment, but it's slower than most people expected, maybe.
Yeah, but will it? We don't know. I mean, there isn't, I mean, so many billions and trillions are going into this stuff. And the big tech companies need employers to buy it and adopt it to recoup some of their investment. But are we adopting stuff that's not quite ready in some instances? We talked a little bit about this in a film I made recently about agents, agentic AI. Huge amount of hype. Does the reality match it? Probably not yet.
Yeah, I talked to a leader in a healthcare firm very recently, a couple of weeks ago, who said we've been using it to compare trial results and to look at different data sets, and the amount of errors in it mean that we have to do more work than we did when we just did it manually. And so I think there is a curve. We'll see if we get to the end of it. The other thing which came out of that report is the shadow use, is that 90% of people working have got it on their phone, and we don't really know how they're using that, and it's hard to track how that's impacting work.
It's everywhere, and I think that, but that's a shadow story, isn't it? We all know everyone's bringing their own AI to work. Is there a sense in which employers are going, oh, I don't want to see that?
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of risk management, it's really difficult to regulate it. Maybe it's better not to know. But I'm sure, instinctively, I know from interviews, huge amounts of information are going into it, and we don't really know how any of that's going to be used or where it's going to pop up again. I'm quite conscious when I put things into it, I think, where is this going and when is it going to come back at some point?
Yeah, when I use the FTs, we've got a walled OpenAI chat GPT, but I can find myself tipping over into asking it quite personal questions. And I think, man, the FT's training on my terrible personal life. So
I
yeah,
know.
I'm
Yeah,
doing it myself.
it is, you've got to be really aware. It's so easy to go down the little rabbit hole and be. I was sending somebody a card recently. Do you ever get totally paralyzed for what to say? And it was a really person. And then I felt slightly fraudulent because it gave me a brilliant line. It was exactly what I needed in the moment. It's, oh God, I've written your card by AI, and I feel guilty about it. Brilliant. Okay, anything else that we need to tick off this week, would you say?
The other thing is that I'm delving into, did you see that survey that showed that AI uptake has dropped?
I did.
And there's been some questioning of the data, so I'm just having a little look at that.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to this paralysis, doesn't it? I think people are not seeing the immediate results. They're not sure. There are risks associated with it. And a lot of leaders still aren't clear. I mean, I spoke to somebody very recently who was great and who said, I'm doing loads on AI, really into it. I'm kind of sort of strategic. The person who works for me is much better at it than I am. So actually they make it all work. But my boss doesn't understand what we're doing. And whatever we ask for, they just say yes because they're too embarrassed to admit they don't know what we're doing. So you end up with this sort of power structure being messed up. Not much oversight if the senior people aren't curious enough, to your point, about what actually is going on. And then lots potentially of popping ups of AI that aren't terribly coordinated or well managed. So it is a bit untidy, I think.
It's making me think of the, those primary school tables where they sit all the children together who are at wildly different stages of their learning and
Yeah.
expect them to, rub along together. And it's often, it can often be quite catastrophic.
But our leaders are the teachers in that
They are.
scenario.
I
Here we
was,
go.
I was having them sitting at the table. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. They
That
are.
one doesn't get it at all and is sat staring at the clock waiting for lunchtime. And that one who really gets it has gone off outside to play with something else because they're so dull to them that they completely get it. And I've got no control over any of this.
Wow. It's a wild, wild west out there.
It is. It's exciting. Okay, well, should we leave it there for this week? If anybody sees this and's got questions, comments, subjects you want Isabel and I to look at, drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you.
Right, lovely to speak to you.